Greetings, students. All right, so let's go through what characteristics are required to consider something alive. So to consider something alive, they have to meet all 7 of these characteristics. And a way that we can remember that is with the mnemonic device, Mrs. HEGO. So here's Mrs. HEGO, isn't she so cute? And she is alive. So let's talk about what each letter stands for in Mrs. HEGO. Okay, so the first one, the first characteristic, M. M stands for membrane-bound cells. So remember, according to cell theory, all living things are made of cells. So, this makes sense. So cells are just the basic unit of life. And when we say membrane-bound, that just means on the outside of every single cell, there is a cell membrane. And here's a zoomed-in picture of a cell membrane. It looks like a phospholipid bilayer with some other stuff inserted into it. So this is a characteristic of life. All life is made of cells, which are surrounded by cell membranes. That's what M stands for. Okay, next is R. R stands for cellular respiration. And when we say respiration here, we don't mean breathing respiration. We mean cellular respiration. And what that is cellular respiration is making ATP. So remember, ATP is like a chemical battery for your cells. ATP is what powers all of the machinery in your cells. And respiration are the series of chemical reactions where your cells make ATP. Where does that happen? This happens mostly in the mitochondria of cells. That's why we always say the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. What we say, or when we say that, what we really mean is mitochondria are the ones that make ATP. That's what the R stands for, cellular respiration. Okay, next up, S. S stands for sensitive, meaning that you can react to external stimuli. So that might look something like a plant growing towards the light, so it's able to sense that light and change its behavior or physiology in reaction to that light. So in this case, the plant might grow towards the light. Another example could be this Venus flytrap. So Venus flytraps have these like little hairs, and if you tickle those hairs, it closes. So that's an external stimuli, tickly, and then the reaction is closing. Even something really simple like a bacteria is sensitive. Let's say the bacteria is swimming around in some sort of liquid, and there's a whole bunch of glucose in that liquid. Well, the bacteria can actually sense that glucose and then swim over closer towards it because that's tasty food, right? So S, this is one of the requirements of life, is sensitive to external stimuli. Okay, next up, H. H stands for homeostasis. So homeostasis just means maintaining a steady state. So an example of homeostasis could be something like this here. So our bodies keep our body temperature in homeostasis, meaning it's going to keep our body temperature at just that right level. If you go outside and it's super cold outside, how does your body try to get back to homeostasis? Well, you'll start shivering, right? And by shivering, you'll increase your body temperature, and that takes you back to that steady state. If you go outside and it's like super hot outside, you'll start to sweat, right? That'll cool you down. Once again, that's a way to keep us at that steady state. So this is another characteristic of life, homeostasis. Okay, next up, E. E stands for evolution. And what evolution is change over many, many, many generations. So for example, my favorite example of all of evolution is whales. So the very ancient predecessors of whales were actually these mammals that lived on land that sort of looked like goats. And over thousands and thousands and thousands of generations and just tiny, tiny, tiny minute changes in generation, eventually they became whales. So this very slow change over many generations, that is evolution, and it's a characteristic of all life. Next up comes G. G stands for growth and reproduction. And specifically here, when I say growth and reproduction, what you should be thinking about is cell division. Why? Well, remember, all cells come from pre-existing cells. So in order to reproduce, those cells need to be dividing in order to make new cells. For example, the cells need to be dividing into sperm and eggs, and then those eggs and sperm join together to make a fertilized zygote that will eventually become a baby. Same thing with growth. So remember, we all start from one single fertilized egg. and then that cell divides a whole bunch of times so that that egg becomes larger, and then you eventually become like a full-on human, right? So that's growth, and growth just means cells dividing. So that's what the G stands for. G stands for growth and reproduction, and specifically we mean cell division. Wonderful. Okay, and then next up is O. O stands for organized complexity. And this just means that living things are made of a lot of really complex molecules, but they're all organized in a very specific way. It's not just like a gobbledygook of molecule soup. So for example, like atoms make molecules, molecules make macromolecules. Those macromolecules assemble into organelles, which all have specific purposes and keep the cell organized. This is this idea of organized complexity. So really complex, but also in a very specific pattern. Okay, so those are the 7 characteristics of life. Let's just quickly summarize all of them. So here they are, all 7 characteristics. Just as a reminder, something has to meet all 7 in order to be alive. Even if something meets 6 out of the 7, it wouldn't be considered alive. So for example, if you've seen WALL-E, WALL-E's a really good example because WALL-E has pretty much all of these things. But for example, WALL-E is not made of cells. And therefore, even though WALL-E is so cute and we love him, we would not consider him alive. And there you go. There are the 7 characteristics of life.